Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights. And I focus on both natal and relationship astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and click the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a private consultation on astrology, I do readings on a wide variety of topics. You can check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there, so you can email me for a full list of prices and options, reading options, and payment methods and other details. And also, more recently, I have started memberships on this channel. If you are interested in getting more access and some more perks, I've also linked a video in the video description on details with respect to memberships. There are 3 membership options, and the highest level implies 4 extra videos per month on astrology, and the second highest level implies 2 extra videos per month, a minimum of 2 extra videos per month. But you can get more details on them in the video that I will link in the video description. And also, last but not least, I've also started a tarot channel more recently than this one, and I will be linking it also in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. So if you're interested in tarot, go ahead and check it out. Maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. All right, so to get straight into it, today's topic is about something that I have thought about for a while. I have decided to make this video rather spontaneously because it is a topic that has been on my mind, well, for a while, like I said, but more recently it kept surfacing more and more in discussions that I've had with people and also readings that I've done and, you know, everywhere. And when a topic appears that often, it's kind of a sign that you should be talking about it. I really felt like talking about it. And namely, it's about how do you see if you are likely to meet your future partner. I mean, I'm talking here mainly about serious relationships that are very likely to end in marriage or are just going to be long-term relationships. So in other words, especially if you are on my channel for a long time, I'm talking about the 7th house kind of relationships as opposed to 5th house kind of relationships, which are more about, you know, affairs and potentially shorter duration relationships, right? So 7th relationships, what are the 7th house relationships? What are the odds that you are going to meet your future spouse or your long-term partner online? And what configurations do you check for this? Now, the reason I think this is important as a topic is because I feel like online dating and meeting people through social media, because it's not just like specifically online dating, but in general, it's like a lot of people are being sold the idea that you can meet a potential partner online, but not everyone has the configurations that would suggest that you will meet this future partner online. Now, I'm going to talk about the specific configurations in a bit, and first of all, I will start by saying kind of as a disclaimer that if you don't find that you have these configurations, none of them, let's say the ones that I'm going to enumerate and elaborate further, don't get discouraged and don't think that 100%, oh my God. So especially if you're, let's say, talking to someone that you have met online and you have been thinking about meeting them in real life, then don't let this video just discourage you and think, well, if I don't have these configurations, then it definitely wasn't meant to be. That's not what I'm trying to say. Of course, there could always be, I don't know, some very specific yogas happening in, let's say, the Navamsha or some other divisional chart that maybe show that you're going to be an exception, or, you know, I'm going to be mainly addressing the most common configurations that I have seen, and I'm also going to be looking at some famous examples for this video towards the end. Because, yeah, I think that this is a really interesting topic because I've seen it, you know, create confusions as well. Because I've actually noticed this again mostly through reading charts, and now I have specifically for this video searched some famous people. I literally searched for famous people who met their partners online, and I've met, I've done some of their charts, and I'm gonna analyze them at the end. But mainly, I've noticed these patterns that I'm gonna talk about by reading loads of charts, and kept seeing like the same configurations. Like, for instance, I've known people who have had, let's say, like 2-3 serious relationships, and every single one of those partners was someone that they met online. Whereas you have other people who don't have specific configurations, who maybe try to meet someone online, they maybe even go on dates, but nothing comes out of them, or it just leads to a perpetual string of disappointments. And so I think that this topic is useful for some people, especially if you are considering trying maybe online dating, signing up for a dating website, to see if you have at least some of these configurations that could suggest you might meet your partner online. And also, as I have mentioned in the introduction, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have these configurations that you're only gonna meet through potentially dating websites. I'm talking about any online environment, all right? So I'm gonna get more into the details as I go along. So let me get straight into the configurations. I would say, all right, I'm going to try to enumerate them in no particular order because each of them are important, really. It's not important that you have every single one of these configurations, but the more of them that you have, the more likely it is that you're going to meet your future romantic partner or spouse even through online media. And the first one, I would say, is the third house, being connected to the seventh house. Now, I should start like this. The main configurations that you want to look for in your horoscope with respect to circumstances surrounding meeting of the spouse. I've also done a video a while ago, I think, where I talked about seventh house lord going through houses and how it relates to circumstances surrounding meeting of the spouse. I'm going to be linking that in the video description if you want to get more details. I've also done a video about the Upapada Lagna in detail because I'm not going to get more in detail about the Upapada Lagna, what it is, how to calculate it, but I'm going to reference it. So I'm just going to briefly say that the Upapada Lagna is basically a Lagna or an ascendant that is calculated based on the 12th house of your natal chart. And it is said to give a more detailed overview of your future spouse. And I also mentioned in the video where I talked about it in depth that the Lord of the Upapada Lagna by house placement can indicate how you're going to meet your future spouse. Similarly to how the seventh Lord placement in your D1 chart can indicate circumstances surrounding meeting of the spouse. And when you look at these, these are the two most important ones, right? Then you can also look at things like the Dharakaraka, which is the planet with the lowest degree in your D1 chart. I'm talking about the D1 chart here. I don't think it's necessary to go for Navamsha or something. I'm talking D1 chart and Upapada Lagna, which is also basically an overlapping of the D1, but you look at it from the perspective of the Upapada Lagna sign. All right. I've talked more in detail about this in the Upapada Lagna video. So you want to look at, these are the most important things, the Lord of the Upapada Lagna by house placement, and also by aspect to other planets. So, for example, if the Upapada Lagna Lord, let's say, is in the seventh house, but it's conjunct the Lord of the third house, that also implies that the third house is influencing the circumstances surrounding the meeting of the spouse, right? So you look at that, you look at the house lords, what lords are aspecting also the Lord of the Upapada Lagna. And you also look, of course, at the house placement. The signs, not so much, except if you want to get more into details about symbolism. I would say no. To simplify it, don't look at the sign placements or the nakshatras for this. You're talking strictly houses here. and also to some extent look at aspects to the Upapada Lagna itself to a much lesser extent, I would say. Maybe if you're hovering in between yes or no, look for other influences. But mainly you want to look at the placement by house of the Lord of the Upapada Lagna, and equally so, you want to look at the placement by house of the Lord of your natal 7th house, right? So the house that is opposite your ascendant. If you're ascendant in Gemini, then your 7th house will be a Sagittarius. And the Lord of Sagittarius is Jupiter. So you want to look at where is Jupiter placed in your D1 chart, and that will give you a hint towards how you're going to meet your future spouse, the circumstances, where exactly, how and where. All right, circumstances surrounding meeting of the spouse. And you also, again, want to look at aspects, right? Is Jupiter aspected by a planet, or is it conjunct a planet? And if it is conjunct a planet, then what houses do that planet govern, right? Because those houses will also influence the circumstances. So these are the main things you want to look at. Like I said, to a lesser extent, you also can check the Dara Karaka, which is the planet with the lowest degree, Venus for men, for straight men, especially, and Jupiter for straight women. Again, if you're gay, depending on whether you identify as more masculine or more feminine, you can check Jupiter if you identify as more feminine, Venus if you identify as more masculine. This is the way that I generally check it, and it has worked so far. All right, but when it comes to non-straight relationships, I cannot guarantee 100%. So ideally, to make sure, you should check both Jupiter and Venus, right? So again, for Jupiter, Venus, and Dara Karaka, you can also again check the house placements and similarly aspects. But I would say you don't even have to go that far, all right? To simplify it, right? Look mainly towards the Lord of the 7th house and the Lord of the Upapada Lagna, house placements and aspects. These are the ones that I have found to be the most influential with respect to circumstances surrounding how you're going to meet your future spouse. And now I'm going to get to the specific influences on these points that will indicate that you are going to meet this person online. So like I started to say, the main indicator is the 3rd house, because the 3rd house is the house of communication. Now, the 3rd house, bear in mind, does not automatically mean that you're going to meet the spouse online. In fact, none of these placements automatically mean that you're going to meet the spouse online. But if you do have 3rd house influence, it is a possibility. And the more of these influences you have, the more probable it is that somehow the meeting of the spouse is through the online medium. And 3rd house can also mean, short distance travel, errands, can also mean any form of communication. So 3rd house in the past could mean, people who met through correspondence, for instance. 3rd house also means neighborhood or younger siblings. So you could have met this person through a younger sibling, or you could meet this person when they move into your neighborhood. I remember saying this in one video where I talked about Jordan Peterson's his horoscope, that he met his spouse. He said in an interview he met his spouse because they were neighbors when they were growing up. And if I remember correctly, he had a prominent signifier of the relationships. I'm not 100% sure which one. I don't know if it was the 7th house lord, but it could be the 7th house lord, or either Venus or the Dara Karaka in the 3rd house, right? So that's an example of the 3rd house being the 3rd house influence as well. So it could be something like you met in your neighborhood. But nowadays, 3rd house is very much connected to communication through online media. All right, so 3rd house is one of the most important signifiers. If the 3rd house is somehow connected to the 7th house by, again, mainly to the Lord of the 7th house or the Lord of the Upapada Lagna. And when you're looking at the Upapada Lagna, you check the 3rd house from the Upapada Lagna. So if your Upapada Lagna, let's say your Lagna is in Aries and your Upapada Lagna is in Pisces, then the 3rd from the Upapada will be, Taurus. Yeah? So you check where, if Venus is somehow connected to Jupiter, right? Because the lord of Pisces is Jupiter and the lord of the third from the Upapada is Venus. If there's a connection between these two, there is a likelihood that you're going to meet your spouse online. Just to give you an example. Now, the second is Rahu. Rahu in general is technology. Rahu, or the north node of the moon, as it is called in tropical astrology, right? This is for those of you who are maybe have just landed here, right? So Rahu connected again to the lord of the seventh house, to the seventh house itself, can show that you're going to meet your spouse through an online medium. Because again, also Rahu shows anything that is unorthodox, unconventional, stuff like that. So when you think about it, even nowadays, even though nowadays more than ever, I think it's common to meet people online, it's still kind of seen as not the traditional way, right? It's still kind of seen as a little bit, different than what would be expected in most cases. And yeah, so Rahu being connected to the lord of the seventh house, or again, the Upapada Lagna and the Upapada Lagna lord, can again potentially show that you're going to meet the spouse online. But again, Rahu can mean many things, right? It's because Rahu is technology and nonconformism in general. So having, let's say, Rahu connected to the seventh house could just mean that you have met through very unusual circumstances, So again, in the past, this could be something like serendipity or something. I don't know. You were... I don't know, like something, some of these weird circumstances where it just seems like the fates conspired to bring you together, like that would be something like Rahu, if you have, let's say, the lord of the seventh house, especially if it's the lord of the seventh house, let's say, maybe it is Rahu, by the way, if the seventh house falls in Aquarius, in which case you would have two lords of the seventh house. You would have to look at Rahu and also Saturn. But also if Rahu is conjunct the lord of the seventh house or conjunct the lord of the Upapada Lagna, that's another thing to look at. Now, to a little bit of a lesser extent, not as prominent, but I've seen this as well a lot, you see fifth house and fourth house. Because fifth house is especially relevant if you're looking to meet someone through a dating app. Because fifth house is specifically about romance, and it's also about fun. So it's about things that are specifically focused on romance, right? So dating app would very much fall in that category because it's specifically designed for romance, finding a partner, or, including finding short-term relationships. Even though you may not be looking just for a short-term relationship, those apps are often used for that. So that would fall under fifth house. Of course, again, fifth house can also show many other things, like you could meet this person through doing what you love, having fun, maybe pursuing a hobby, any kind of like relaxing activity, even a holiday, anything that you do for fun, basically, is the fifth house. So I've known people who have, let's say, lord of the seventh in the fifth house, and they met their partner doing a dancing class or something like that. But then you also, a lot of the times, can see it in situations where people met through a dating app, and it generally with the fifth house and the fourth house, you do want to see a little bit of other influences as well, like maybe a little bit of the third house, maybe a little bit of Mercury, maybe Mercury in the seventh. Another thing is also, like I said originally, to a lesser extent, you also want to look at aspects at the seventh house. So if Mercury and Rahu are aspecting the seventh house. So in other words, if you have Rahu or Ketu in the first house of your D1 chart, it is already kind of, you have a little bit more than average possibility that you might meet your partner online. And also Mercury, because again, Mercury is the natural ruler of the third house, and it has to do with communication. Okay, but I would say, again, it's not so much about these planets aspecting the seventh house or being in the seventh house as it is about aspecting the lord of the seventh house, because there's a difference there, all right? It might add more likelihood also if they're aspecting the house or if they're sitting in the house, right? Especially with Rahu, because Rahu just brings unconventionality altogether. So, where was I? Not just these planets, also if you have the lord of your third house in your horoscope, right? So let's say in your horoscope you have, I don't know, let's say your third house is in Leo, right? So the sun rules the third house. So, and you have the sun aspecting the sun sitting, let's say, in the seventh house, or the sun is sitting in the first house looking at the seventh house. That could also bring some higher than average likelihood that you could meet your spouse through the online medium. But mainly it's about conjunctions, like I said. It's about looking at the lords of the seventh house, the lord of the seventh house, the lord of the Upapada Lagna. So fifth house, going back to fifth house is a good influence that could show, especially if you're looking to meet someone through dating apps, that you could meet the spouse online. But like I said, you also want to look at potentially other influences as well. And the fourth house also, because the fourth house is basically the home base. And a lot of the times when people meet online, well, it means that they're staying at home, and they are, surfing the web, and they're meeting their spouse like that. So, and again, with the fourth house, it could be anything, basically, because you also want to look at these specific circumstances, okay? So with the fourth house, it could be, depending on what other influences are there, you could even meet at work, but let's say if the fourth house and the sixth house are involved, maybe you're working from home and you meet this person through a new job that is online, right? You're working from home. So you meet online, basically, but you are staying at home while you're working. Or if the fourth house and the 10th house, let's say, are connected to the lord of the seventh house or the lord of the Upapada Lagna, again, could be a plausible explanation. Maybe you meet online, but you are working, right? So there could be different circumstances depending on what other influences are there. But the fourth house is one possibility that can show you meet this person online. Right? Because you're staying at home and you are just chatting online, and that's how you meet. All right. So it could be through different, like I said, with the fourth house, it could be different things. It could be either through work, it could be social media, it could be dating apps, right? So it could be anything where you're just like staying at home and surfing the web. All right. And these are basically the main influences. So let me look at the few examples, the famous examples that I have found. So first of all, I have searched, one example that I found was Adam Levine. Now, I know Adam Levine has been some kind of a source of controversy recently, but to be honest, I don't follow his life personally. I'm not that interested. I know that he's a famous singer. He was part of Maroon 5, I think, back in the day. And so I'm not here to comment on his, career or any controversies that he was involved in. I'm strictly using his chart as an example as someone who was said to meet their spouse online. So if you look at his horoscope, the ruler of the seventh house, actually he has two rulers of the seventh house because seventh house is in Aquarius. So the rulers are Saturn and Rahu, are both of them sitting in the first house. Now, again, first of all, you have Rahu here, which again shows technology, as I mentioned initially. So with Rahu, you definitely have the possibility. So that's like one box that is ticked already, 1 point for potentially meeting your spouse online, because Rahu is, it's there in the first house, and it's influencing actually the first seventh house axis. And not only that, but it's also conjunct the second ruler of the seventh house, which is Saturn. Very interesting. Now, his Upapada Lagna, again, if you want to know how to calculate the Upapada Lagna, I do suggest that you watch the video that I will be linking in the description, because I won't be sitting through, explaining all of that all over again. But his Upapada Lagna is in Pisces. And again, if you look at the chart from the Upapada Lagna perspective, the lord of the Upapada Lagna, Jupiter, falls in the fifth house from the Upapada Lagna, and it's opposite Venus, which rules the third house and the seventh house from the Upapada Lagna. So you have, again, two other indicators that this person, the native, might meet their future spouse through the online medium, because you have the fifth house and you also have the third house influencing the lord of the Upapada Lagna. All right, and initially he also had Rahu there in the D1 chart. Now, moving on to Ricky Martin, and Ricky Martin is interesting because he is a gay man, but that doesn't make a difference because I will be looking mainly at the 7th house lord, so I'm not going to get into specifically Jupiter, Venus, and all that. As I mentioned initially, those also help if you are sitting on the fence about whether it is likely that a person will meet their spouse online or not. But mainly you want to look at the 7th lord placement and the Upapada Lagna lord placement. All right, so the rulers of the 7th house in his case are Mars and Ketu because 7th house is falling in Scorpio. Mars is in 11th house conjunct Moon, which is the ruler of the 3rd house. Already you have the 3rd house being involved. And Ketu, which is the 2nd lord of the 7th house, is falling in the 3rd house. Which is, again, another indicator that this person... So you have two indicators because both of the lords of the 7th house are connected to the 3rd house, basically. Right. And now if you look at his Upapada Lagna, which is in Aquarius, Saturn, the ruler of Aquarius, is falling in the 4th from the Upapada Lagna. Another indicator that this could be someone that he meets online. And second Upapada Lagna lord, which is Rahu, is in the 12th house. Yeah. So the 12th house is not that important in this situation, but he already has also, just like the first example, 3 points in this direction. So he has it from the D1 chart. Both rulers of the 7th house are connected to the 3rd, and then the Upapada Lagna lord is in the 4th, right? The third example that I found is Mandy Moore, who has Rahu in the 1st house already. She has the Rahu-Ketu axis in the first 7 houses. There is the influence of Rahu because remember, Rahu and Ketu are always opposite, and Rahu is aspecting basically the 7th house by 7th aspect here. Even though Ketu has the precedence in the 7th house because Ketu is actually sitting there, but Rahu is also aspecting it. So there is the influence of Rahu. And 7th lord, again, the 7th lords are Mars and Ketu, and they're falling in the 7th house. So basically both of them are being aspected by Rahu. Now, the Upapada Lagna lord, in her case, the Upapada Lagna is in Gemini, and now Mercury rules the 4th and 1st houses from Upapada and is falling in the 11th house. So here you have an indirect connection to the 4th house, right? Because Mercury is not actually sitting in the 4th house, but it is ruling the 4th house, and it is falling in the 11th, which is... I haven't studied this more in depth, their history and how she met her spouse or anything like that. But with the 11th house, this could have been a friendship, or they met through a friend, a mutual friend, or through siblings. But the 4th house is an indicator, like I said initially, that this is someone she might meet through an online medium, and that's exactly what happened. And Priyanka Chopra is the last example that I found, and she has 7th lord Mars in the 5th house conjunct Saturn, which is the ruler of the 10th and 9th houses. Also, the second 7th lord, a lot of 7th houses in Scorpio in these examples. So the 2nd 7th lord, Ketu, in the 8th house. So this is really interesting, not entirely related to the topic. But she was born in India, and she's married to one of the Jonas brothers. So, and her configurations here are so clearly depicting that, because one of the lords of the 7th house is falling in the 5th, right? Like I said, the 5th is one of the indicators that you can meet a person online. And it's conjunct Saturn, which is the ruler of the 10th and 9th houses. 10th is the house of career. 9th is the house of faraway foreign lands travels. Her second lord of the 7th house, Ketu, is in the 8th house, which is again a house that is connected to foreign lands, more specifically foreign lands where a foreign language is being spoken as opposed to your mother tongue. So very, very on point in her particular situation here. And let's see. Also, to a lesser extent, you have Moon, the ruler of the 3rd house in her horoscope, sitting in the 1st house looking at the 7th house. So there's a little bit of indirect 3rd house as well. And when you look at the Upapada Lagna, it's even more obvious why she met her spouse online, because you have Upapada Lagna in Aquarius. The first ruler, because again, Upapada Lagna here has two rulers, Saturn and Rahu. So Saturn, one of the rulers of the Upapada, is sitting in the 8th house from the Upapada, conjunct Mars, which is the ruler of the 3rd house from the Upapada Lagna. And once again, you have a reinforced theme of not just that she's going to meet this person online, but somehow it's also connected to a foreign country of a foreign speaking tongue, or like a foreign tongue being spoken. The second lord of the Upapada Lagna, which is Rahu, is in the 5th house from the Upapada Lagna, conjunct Mercury, conjunct Venus, which are the rulers of the 4th, 5th, 9th houses from the Upapada Lagna. So basically what you have in her situations is a strong reiteration of the themes shown in the D1 already with respect to how she's going to meet her spouse. So clearly there's a strong influence of some kind of online communication, but there's also the 10th house, the 9th, and the 8th houses being important there, because, and also the 4th and the 5th houses, right, which are again important for communication, like I said. Meeting online, 4th and 5th houses, but 9th house and 10th house explains why she married someone from a foreign place, and most likely met due to her social status and also career connections, because that's what 10th house shows. And yeah, these are pretty much the examples that I have found, and I hope that you have enjoyed this video. And if you have, don't forget to like and subscribe, and click on the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. Of course, anything you would like to comment in the comment section, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, examples, counter examples. I'm very curious to hear about what examples you have with respect to meeting spouses online. All right, and yeah, don't forget to subscribe, to comment, and also, if you are interested in a private consultation, check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. And once again, if you're interested in tarot, don't forget to check out my tarot channel, which I will be linking in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. So yes, thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you at my next video. Bye!